Hello, this is Carl Irwin with The Common Magician, and I just want to have a kind of a short discussion. This is not a deck review. I don't do deck reviews. I'm not really all that interested in kind of the new prints of decks that are out there, which most of them essentially are the same stock of card, essentially the same card, just with some different artwork on them. I'm fairly satisfied with many of the standard decks that you can find out there, and some of the ones that the U.S. Playing Card Company has been printing for many years. So I'm fairly satisfied with those. I don't have a great interest in stockpiling and creating kind of a collection of various different types of decks. So that's not what this is about. So it's not really a review. But I do want to take some time to talk about the qualities of various types of decks that are very, very common, and also kind of dispel some of the rumors and feelings that certain cards, certain inexpensive cards, are useless and not useful at all for Magic, for card handling, and for close-up kinds of routines that require, moderate to fairly simple kinds of sleights. So that's what this discussion is going to be out. The first thing I want to talk about is that there are very different eras of card manufacture that the U.S. Playing Card Company has gone through. There is kind of the older historical era where the U.S. Playing Card Company was operating out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and a certain kind of quality of card that went with that time period. We know that as the blue seal phase, and there was a little bit of overlap there where they changed to kind of a black seal. When I say blue seal, I'm referring to the seal that is on the deck of cards that you see here. They then transitioned out of that to kind of a black seal, and it was during this time that the Playing Card Company, the U.S. Playing Card Company, moved to Erlanger, Kentucky, and the cards were supposed to be the same quality, the same process of manufacture. However, it didn't really turn out that way, and there was a noticeable difference between the blue seal and the black seal phase. In addition to that, I want to talk a little bit about some other cards that the U.S. Playing Card Company manufactures. There is actually, I have a deck here. It's a blue seal deck. It says U.S. Playing Card Company. It's a very interesting design. This is called Champion playing cards, and you can see there's a logo here for a particular store that sells them. But if you look up close, you'll see that it says Made in China. So this was not manufactured in Cincinnati. And they continue to manufacture cards in this way. They put the name of the United States Playing Card Company on it, but they're not manufactured at the actual plant. They're manufactured elsewhere that is outsourced. I want to talk a little bit about those cards. And then lastly, I want to spend some time talking about some other brands of cards that you can find, some that are of a decent quality and some that are obviously not. So we'll take a little bit of time to talk about that a little bit. So that's kind of a brief introduction of this talk that I'm going to have with you. And I also want to address why it's important to understand the differences, what doesn't matter about those differences, and also what must be avoided with the existence of the differences between these types of cards. And some of my tutorials going ahead from here may call back to some of this information, so we may link back to this discussion. So that's the introduction. Let's get a look here at the history. So to begin with, let's start with the earlier playing cards, the blue seal playing cards. I have here a bicycle deck, a B deck, and these are essentially the only cards I really use in any great way. I'm perfectly satisfied with the designs of these. You have the bicycle deck, which has a white border on it, and then you have the B deck, which has a borderless kind of back to it. And the nice thing about the B deck is that it's perfect for gambling type routines where you don't want to have the border in the way for seconds and bottoms, dealing in that kind of manner. The problem with using a borderless deck is that when you have reverse cards, if you're doing a triumph routine, those cards stick out. Probably hard to see on the camera, but there's a very clear line there. And if I have kind of the final situation of a triumph routine, in the final demonstration of the mixed pack. This might be familiar if you're familiar with Triumph. You can see there's a very clear difference between the top half of the pack being one way, the bottom being the other way. So, borderless decks have their limitations in the way you can use them. A quick talk about the difference between these kinds of cards. The B deck is essentially a casino card. Many casino cards are manufactured from this stock. It used to be that the stock was very different. I'm not sure if it's terribly different now with the new manufacturer. But the thickness is often referred to as being thicker. It's not really all that much thicker, if it is thicker at all. But the stock is different in that it seems that there's a little bit more plastic in the embossing, which makes the card, a little bit more springy. It kind of feels softer to the touch. Some people say they feel harder. I don't feel that. I think it feels a little bit more pliable in a way. But they are very durable. The B stock is very, very durable card, which makes sense if it's going to be a casino grade card. The bicycle deck is more for common home use. It also has the embossed finish on it, but it doesn't seem to be quite as deep. And the embossed finish doesn't seem to me to be quite as thick. There seems to be a little bit more of a paper, kind of a lighter touch, a lighter feel to these cards. So that's the difference there. Now, what that means is that the layers of the card are a little bit more durable, a little bit more, static on the B deck and the B stock than they are in the bicycle. So if you're going to be splitting cards, it seems to me a little bit easier to split a bicycle card than it seems to be to split a B card if you were going to make some gaffes. So that is this is what the Blue Seal cards kind of look like. Now I want to touch on one other kind of card. And by the way, these cards are such good quality that you could have one of these Blue Seal decks for many years, and just with regular normal use, they'll stand up pretty well over a period of time. I don't know how old these are, but they're almost like new. They're fairly well worn in, and you can see a little bit of discoloration if you're really looking closely, especially on the edges. But otherwise, it's a really, really, good deck. They fan very well, just as if they were new. They operate just as if they were new. So those older Blue Seal cards were very, very durable, very well made. On an older set of machines. In addition to that, I just want to point out some other cards that the U.S. Playing Card Company has manufactured in the past. This is an Arco deck. These used to be very, very popular among magicians because they were a card that seems to me to be printed on the B stock, but they have a border on them. So you could kind of do border things, but with a little bit more of a durable card. And I don't know if you can see this, but if I do a Pharaoh shuffle, now a Pharaoh shuffle is where you take 26 cards and 26 cards, and then you kind of massage them together, and the cards will step. And you can see how they step together all the way down to the end. It's almost a perfect Pharaoh. I'm a little out of sync here. Right down to the end. I'm botching up the very end of it here. But you can see, again, a Pharaoh is not something I do very often. I am, again, the common magician. But you can see here that these cards Pharaoh quite well. Even though these are quite old. The U.S. Playing Card Company does not print the Arco deck anymore. But these cards, very, very, old. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old, maybe older than that. Other than the discoloration, they still retain a very, very clean edge. They don't have any splits in them. They are able to very quickly put together and do some of the more complex moves, such as a Pharaoh type shuffle. They interlace very easily. That's the old Blue Seal stock. So that's kind of our starting point here. Any one of these cards and other variants, you have Tally-Ho's or also U.S. Playing Card Company, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Aviators, I believe, don't have the... Can't remember if the Aviators have the embossed finish, but they do have a very, very good stock on them. The Tally-Ho's, I don't think they have an embossed finish either. These are the most common ones, these two right here. You can order the others. And then some things that are no longer in print. But these are the cards that we tend to consider the go-to cards for card magic. So that's kind of the starting point in this discussion. Next, we'll look at the kind of newer generation of the same types of cards here, and we'll examine what is a little bit different about those. So the next generation of the U.S. Playing Card Company card stock is the black seal. And you'll also notice that these cards, when they moved the factory to Erlanger, Kentucky, and I might be mispronouncing that, I do apologize, I don't mean to offend anybody, but when they moved the Playing Card Company to Kentucky from Ohio, they also transformed the visuals for the boxes. They changed the back design so that it did not show the original backs of the cards anymore. It's now kind of this different commercial looking design. And interesting enough is that the comments on the back talk about the quality and the longevity of the company and how they've been crafted the same, for a very long time. That's very ironic because the cards have been of a much lower quality since they moved the company. Now, there's reasons for this that I can only speculate. And by the way, the quality has improved considerably over the last few years since they have moved. The quality was much worse right at the move, and then things did improve. One thing that I can speculate is that I'd heard that the machines that they were using at the new location were using the same processes as before. However, the new machines were new machines. They did not transport the old machinery to the new plant. The old machines were sold, and I don't think they are used anymore, but they were sold for some, I don't know, parts or material, I don't know. But they were sold off and they built new machines at the new plant. Now, it seems to me that when you build a new machine, one thing that you're dealing with is that it's brand new. It's not run in, it's not calibrated, it hasn't had the benefit of having been run in for many years and having been adjusted for quality control over the decades and decades that the Blue Seal machines were run. So that's one problem. Now, what's the difference? Well, the stocks are essentially as I described a moment ago, in that, get the black one out of here, the red one's here. The stocks are essentially the same as what I described before, in that you still kind of have the same sort of paper quality and difference between. But one major problem, and also the cut is just as good as it's ever been, but one major problem that has shown up is that the quality of the adhesive, the quality of the connection between the three layers, the paper, the embossed paper, and glue layer in the middle, seems to have diminished considerably from when these were printed in Cincinnati. And what you end up with is a lot more of a problem with splitting cards. Now, I find that once you run in a deck of these newer types of cards, that you'll end up with these little splits in there that makes the farrowing considerably more different and more difficult. I'm getting a lot more discrepancy here than I did before, especially early on. As I try this, it's a little bit more difficult to get it started. They don't want to jump right into place, and actually this one's turning out pretty well here. That's a perfect, except I got one too many cards on the top. That's a perfect farrow, but you can see that it doesn't just grab right in. It doesn't work quite as smoothly right off the start. See, on the other deck, on the other stock, they would be running it right in. And it wouldn't matter if they were new or if they were worn in. The more these get worn in, the harder it will become because the paper tends to separate. The layers separate in there. So that's one difference between the old stock and the new stock. Beyond that, the aesthetics of the boxing is not as good as it used to be. Just a lot more commercial with all these extra kinds of things on there. But the quality was diminished. Okay, that doesn't mean that these still aren't the best. I mean, if you want to get playing cards that are of the quality that you want to use for general practice in card control, you still want to stick with U.S. playing card cards. These are still very, very good. but they are a little bit more tricky. It's not as good as some of these Blue Seal. And people will talk about that, finding Blue Seal decks that are fresh, never having been opened, that are in stock somewhere, and buying those. You can buy bricks of Arco decks, even though they haven't been printed in quite a while. You can buy those online at various outlets, brand new, still in the package. So there is a difference between those. Next, we're going to spend some time talking about some other cards that U.S. Playing Card Company prints, and also other non-U.S. Playing Card Company cards, and why some of those cards might still be useful and why not. So stick around and we'll take a look at this third category. So the third group of playing cards is kind of a mix of a few different things. I want to talk about some cards, other cards that are printed by the U.S. Playing Card Company, and then we'll look at some other brands, really just one other brand in particular, and other ones that are like it, and the qualities of those cards. So first of all, let's talk about other playing cards that they print. They print various other cards. The Hoyle side of the U.S. Playing Card Company has essentially been outsourced now to out-of-country manufacture. It used to be that Hoyle was a branch of the U.S. Playing Card Company that was every bit as high quality as the other brands within the company, but that is not the case anymore that I'm aware of. I used to have a Maverick deck that was printed on the same stock that what you would find for the other U.S. playing card companies with the embossed face and back. And now if you buy a Maverick deck, I don't have one here, you'll see all the same printed design, but you will see that it has been being printed in China. The cards are considerably thicker. The paper is different. And there is no embossed layer. It's just what they call a smooth finish, but it's really kind of a sticky finish. The cards don't fan very well. Now, I found these cards at a particular store, dollar-type store. It's I don't know, kind of a thrift store that was being printed, and I noticed that it's printed by the U.S. Playing Card Company in China. And I checked the thicknesses of these cards with other U.S. playing cards, like bicycles, and I found that the thickness was about the same. Also, the feel was about the same. The one difference was that the layering is not quite as clean. They don't step well, so if you're going to perform a faro shuffle, you find that it's considerably more difficult with these cards. It still can be done, but there's a lot of discrepancies, and they don't kind of interlace very easily. But I also found that there's no embossed layer on it. It's a smooth finish, but they're not terribly sticky. If we're going to be fair, you can take these cards, and they actually do fan pretty well. This is called a Champion. I don't know if they still print these or not, but it was printed for a while. This was when the company was in Cincinnati, but they were printed in China. They fan quite well. They do okay. Now, if you're going to do a hand kind of, fan in the hands, you can see it's quite blocky. But if I'm going to, work on the table, I can use these okay. And there's a few tests here that you can put it through. They do run single cards pretty well on an overhand shuffle. That works out quite well, even though it has a smooth finish. You can do different kinds of dealing. For example, if I was going to do some bottom dealing using an Erdnase grip here, I can actually deal bottoms pretty well. It doesn't really seem to get in the way, this smooth finish on these cards. The artwork on them is kind of interesting. The new cards that are being printed these days, some of the newer ones that are being printed custom-made by the U.S. Playing Card Company for different vendors, are having kind of this more simple back to them with a repetitive design. So the artwork is pretty nice, actually. It's not too bad. The faces are identical to the bicycle artwork. So if you match up the face cards, it's exactly the same print as what you find on the bicycle deck. The only difference would be the jokers, and then the jokers are a little bit more generic. And then the Ace of Spades is also different, because the Ace of Spades would, for the bicycle deck, for example, would have their own logo on it. Let's see if I can find the ace here. This is not a bad-looking ace, really, but it has a name on there. So, in general, I would say that, yes, there are actually cards out there that are not of this quality in stock that are perfectly acceptable for doing Magic. This meets a lot of criteria. The thickness is good. It's the same as what you find with other cards. The feeling is good. The finish is acceptable. It's not perfect. It is able to do, you are able to do a lot of typical kinds of sleights with this deck. And the handling is good. I think I can even do, I'm trying to remember with this deck or not. I think I can even do a strip out shuffle. So if I do a push through, I can do that with this deck. So really, this is perfectly acceptable. Now the good thing about this is that this deck was only $1, so it's less than half the cost of a bicycle deck. And I could buy a bunch of these and do a lot of my magic on the street, and I could get these cards signed. I could tear them up if I wanted to. I can give cards away, and I could run through a pack, a pack in a couple weeks and not really be out a whole lot of money for this. So just some food for thought there as far as other cards that U.S. Playing Card Company prints. It can be hit or miss. You can find some of these that are good quality, or you can find some that are not. So just to keep an open mind about that. So again, if you see a cheap deck, made in China, but it's made by the U.S. Playing Card Company, maybe buy one and see what it's like. You might be surprised at what you can do with it. Other cards. This is a card that's very similar to this deck. I believe the thickness isn't far off. It might be a little bit thicker. This is made by a company called Cartamundi. It's manufactured in Texas, I believe. This one is made in China, but Cartamundi manufactures others in Texas. Similar kind of outcome. The finish is about the same. You can fairly spread them out. They're very shiny, so that's a bit of a problem, perhaps. And these cards are a little bit thicker. It's a little bit of a different stock, so it's a little bit harder to handle. But the back design isn't so bad. It's workable. The artwork is pretty good. The ace, I like the ace. Looks very nice. Let's see, the face card's pretty ornate. Looks pretty standard, and the size of the pips are good. So, keep an open mind again. I could probably do a magic routine with these. They do deal fairly well. I can do a bottom deal fairly easily with it. They do run on an overhand. I can run single cards at a time, and they don't clump. So there are a couple of options there. I think I grabbed two at a time one time there, but otherwise pretty good. So that's Cartamundi Playing Cards. Again, this is kind of a dollar kind of purchase, so much less. The box even has a classic design to it on the back. You can see the back of it. Other cards made by Cartamundi. These are casino quality cards. It says so on the box. Actually means it. Cartamundi does manufacture cards for casinos, and they have an embossed layer on them. They fan quite well. Not quite as good as a U.S. Playing Card Company card. One thing I like about these cards, these are called blackjack playing cards, and the back is a nice design. Looks kind of casino-y because of this little logo on it, but it's pretty minimalist design otherwise. The artwork looks great. I like how the numbers are. It's kind of a swap between the classic size with the pips. And then the numbers are kind of like a jumbo size, kind of a little bit between. So they look really good. I can still cover a pip with my thumb if I was going to fake, kind of have a card stand in for another one. I can still get away with that move. Yeah, these work pretty good. There's only one problem with these cards that I have found, is that the cut is inconsistent, especially on the corners. You'll find that the corners aren't exactly the same on every corner, so that's a pretty small problem. They don't riffle very easily, very well. If you look at this, how they riffle, they're pretty chunky. And even if I go to these U.S. Playing Card China prints, you can see that they riffle very well, even between the two. So the stock is a little bit stiff, and the cut is a little bit inconsistent. But otherwise, these work pretty well. If I do a push-through kind of move with these, it works out pretty well. They are embossed again with the air cushion kind of finish. So that's an option too. And these are about the same price as a bicycle deck. I think they're a few cents cheaper. So you can find these in stores. There are other cards like these that you can find in big retail stores like Walmart or Target. So, again, if you see something that's a little bit cheaper and it looks, like it's worth trying, go ahead and buy a deck and see. You might be surprised. But don't be a snob. There's some other options out there that are workable and can be used. Anyway, that's my short review of different types of cards and the problems that they present between the different stocks. And again, this might be a video that I relate back to as I go through other tutorials, why you have to do particular things a particular way with certain kinds of cards versus other ones. So anyway, that's just a quick talk about the different kinds of cards that you'll run into and my personal preferences on those different kinds of cards. Hopefully this is a helpful discussion for you, and wish all of you happy magicking.